Okay. Well, welcome everyone. All right. Do we have any members of the public with us today?
No.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'll call the meeting to order. And this is Nancy Niels Nelson. I'm the vice chair of LCAB, and I'll conduct the meeting this morning. First of all, I need an approval of our agenda for today. Would somebody do that, please?
I'll motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you,
Bob.
Bob. A second?
A second.
Thanks, Jacob. All right, any discussion? Any additions? Okay, all in favor of accepting the today's agenda, please say aye. Or raise your hands or
Aye.
whatever. Yeah, I don't know what we're doing today. Okay, thank you. Okay, the next is looking at last month's minutes. Does anybody have any comments about those minutes? Any changes or corrections? Okay, I just wanted to, I know Jill, are you on the call? I think Jill is on the call.
I'm here.
Good.
Hi.
I wanted to thank you so much for the presentation last month. That was really helpful. And actually I had a meeting after that meeting that I used a lot of resources from what you told us. So thanks a lot.
I'm glad to hear it. Happy to hear it.
Okay. If there's no updates, would somebody give me a motion to accept the last minutes from last month?
I'd love to do that, Nancy.
Thank you, Bob.
I'll second.
Thank you. Who is that?
Matt.
Matt, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, where's Bob Gale when we need him, you know? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Or aye, or
Aye.
raise your hands.
Aye.
Okay. All right. There was no one from the public. Is there anybody who's added since? Okay, there's no public comment this morning. So I'm going to start it right off. Michelle, let's go.
Thank you. I am so excited to be joining you guys today and submitting the very first application for the Buncombe County's bond environmental protection funds. It's like a pivotal moment in our county, I think. So I wanted to, as I think many of you know, this is for the Lake Eden Preserve Conservation Easement, which this board has already reviewed this project and awarded transaction costs to support it. So I have, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to run through basically the same presentation that I did for the previous project. So let me just get this set up here. Can you all see that and my cursor?
Yep, we can
Michelle,
start.
can you remind us of the amount of the transaction costs that we had approved?
The transaction costs were, I want to say, like $43,000 or something in that realm. Yeah, and so this project is located in the Black Mountains focus areas. Just as a reminder, these are all the places where SHC works. So we're here in the Black Mountains. And so this property is shown here in red, and the areas in this kind of beigey color are excluded from the conservation easement. They're excluded because this is the location of Camp Rockmont, summer camp for boys, and the Lake Eden Arts Festival and some other private lands here. We wanted to make sure we were going to allow ample room for the camp operations and the festival, and there are really a lot of events that happen down there. And so we wanted to make sure they had room for expansion and growth of those enterprises and activities. Very near the Asheville watershed and the Bee Tree watershed. Everything you see in blue is land that SHC has a conservation easement on. This is the Montreat Wilderness here. Light blue is our fee simple preserves. And of course, the Blue Ridge Parkway running along here in gray. And this is Highway 70. So that's just a little context for everyone. So the conservation easement area is 336 acres. It's a portion of about 539 acre property. This is a very generous bargain sale conservation easement. It's in the Wildlands Network Connectivity Corridor, which connects wildlife corridors from large intact blocks of protected land. It has above average climate resilience. And it's in the Nature Conservancies. They have forest matrix blocks, and it's in the Asheville watershed, Curtis Creek, which is a tier 1, the highest level of the forest matrix block. And we think it's visible from the parkway at Craggy Pinnacle, and also most likely from Highway 70. So this is a little more of a zoomed in view. So these white dotted lines, these are the ridge lines. And it really is like a bowl that is surrounded by, a ridge line on the northern slope and on the western slope. And there's also, it dips down on the other side of the slope a little bit. And this crosshatch, the black crosshatched areas are the state designated natural areas. And when we had the state biologists and some other biologists come out, they found enough evidence up here in this 107 acre area to designate a brand new natural area that's fully contained within this property. There are 4 rare species that they found at that time. There's also 7 headwater streams that originate on the property. And this is also the backdrop to a state significant historic site, which is the location of Black Mountain College. Which are the buildings are right down there behind Lake Eden. So I've marked Cedar Cliff here, and Lake Eden Rock is sort of right up in here somewhere, and it's really stunning area where there's a low elevation basic glade, which is a significant habitat as well. This just kind of is a Google Earth image, so you can see a little bit how it lays on the landscape. And here's a photo of the Lake Eden, and it's pretty much most of these. This is the northern boundary ridgeline and the western boundary ridgeline here, and then it continues a little bit cut off this photo. This is a view from Eden Rock, and that you can see a little bit of that glade area around it. And this is the glade, the low elevation basic glade. Within the conservation easement, they have the right to construct, I think, up to 2 or 3 more of these Adirondack shelters. These are for use by the Camp Rockmont summer camp. And they're basically hike-in only, fire pit, and such activities. So I'm going to go back. This is that's the old budget. So I'm going to switch over now. I can figure out how to do that to the new budget here because it's been updated.
While you're doing that, are there trails to the locations of those proposed shelters, or is that something that they would propose as well?
There is a fairly extensive trail system there. I have a map of it, which I didn't have preloaded, but there are existing trails. The conservation easement also allows for, or will, it hasn't been drafted yet, will allow for some mountain biking, and everything within the easement has to meet the requirements of the North Carolina Land and Water Fund, which grant was recently approved. And this project actually was the second highest ranking project of all of those submitted to the Land and Water Fund's application round this year. So very excited about that and that grant approval as well. And those matching funds that have now been approved, which was $550,000 towards the purchase price. Anyway, just getting back to your trail question, the Land and Water Fund has some pretty detailed guidelines for trails that are allowed for mountain bikes, specifying like no electric bikes, although there's some talk about classifications there. But all that to say is there are trail systems there, and care will be taken for sure to make sure that the trails that are being used are not going to contribute to any erosion of the waters there.
This is Joel. This is the tract of land we visited some time ago.
Yes, we hiked to the waterfall. What was it called? It was like Hidden Branch or something like that. Or no, like Barely Falls, I think they called it. Yes. And so you recall that Damon Hearn was there, and I think, were you there at the same time Damon was? Maybe that was a different visit.
Yeah.
But yes, we've been out on that property. So for the finances here, we're requesting $250,000 to support the purchase price. So we estimate the value of the conservation easement to be about $3 million. That is based on an assumption that the full market value of the property is a little less than 14,000 an acre. And then we've done some estimates of calculating what the conservation easement value might be based on that, which those estimates are shown right here. So for the full market value of the fee simple property is probably close to $4.6 million, we think, based on our estimates. And then the conservation easement would be about 65%. That's about average of what the diminution of value for conservation easements of this type would be. And so we're assuming a conservation easement value of about $3 million. The landowners are very generously doing a 50% bargain sale. So the purchase price for the conservation easement is $1.5 million. That would be about $4,500 an acre. And that's about consistent for conservation easement value with what we paid for the Woodfin watershed and the Christmont conservation easements, which are both nearby. As is one of the criteria for the bond funds, is that this is sort of a last resort source of funding. And that is true in this case. We have evaluated alternate funding opportunities, and we have already received commitments from the Land and Water Fund, as I noted, as well as a private donor in the amount of $700,000, plus the 1.5 million donation of value from the landowners. We have not identified any other sources of funding that we can raise this last $250,000 fund from. And so that's why we're going to the Buncombe bond funds. Other matching funds include all the transaction costs. And so this would come to, I think I calculated it out to be 8% of the total project value for this project would be coming from the Buncombe County bonds. And these are the same maps that I just showed you. So I wanted to, I guess, open this up to any questions that anyone has about this.
Is Jill on? I was wondering if Jill could just touch
Yeah.
on any of the criteria and things as far as bonds go that we might need to be aware of. For instance, I think one of the criteria is that it could be eligible for up to 50% of the easement value. And I do wonder, is that just the purchase price or is that the total cost?
So that would be the purchase price,
Okay.
and it looks like, I mean, the bond contribution for this project, as Michelle just said, is a lot less than that 50% contribution. The landowner is donating 50%, which is the minimum requirement for the bond. And then SAHC has leveraged over another million, I think, if I remember the numbers correctly, on top of that. So the bond contribution would be 250,000.
Right. Is there anything else in that criteria that we need to be aware of that you'd like to point out, or?
I mean, the rest of the criteria for the bond is consistent with the criteria LCAB has been using already for conservation easements. So I think that's more the board's purview of whether or not we think the project aligns well with that criteria. The one bond specific criteria is that element of the minimum 50% donation. There's also a consideration for the bond of, wanting to ensure that any conservation easements on land that does not potentially conflict with areas that would be good for affordable housing developments. Michelle, I don't know if you have any notes on that. For example, we took out the items on proximity to sewer and water linkage for the bond, so that we didn't potentially have those conflicts. But that is one other element I have to say.
Again, I was looking at the information on the county website, and I don't disagree with the donation of 50%, but what I'm reading is eligible for county easement purchase grant up to 50% of easement value, which means that even if and I'm not saying we're close to that, but as a point that we would only be able to approve up to 50% of the value. And could you go back to your sheet there, Michelle, the price sheet?
After you do that, I will share my screen to show the slide that was approved by the commissioners, just to clear up any questions.
That'd be great.
So once Michelle's done with that, I can do that.
So when I look back at the spreadsheet, then I see 50%, and then we need to back out what the value of the land is, which obviously this is less, but since this is our first time, I think it's worth noting. Because it wouldn't be a value that they gave 50%, it would be that we have the ability to approve up to 50% is the way I read it, unless there's something that was approved that was different than what's on the website.
If you can stop sharing your screen, Michelle, then I will share this slide.
Yeah, and thank you for asking this, Matt, because I kind of had some similar questions, and it's just helpful to put it in.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get some clarification, so we'll start off on the right foot.
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, so this was the slide the commissioners last approved when we did the criteria. So we need to make sure that this project meets 2 of the following conditions, which it definitely
Here it is. There.
And then
Right. That was
if it meets at least 2 of
mistake.
those, we need to make sure that the last 2 conditions are met. So
Got
the
it.
bond can fund up to 50% of the easement value after other funding sources have been explored or exhausted. So they've definitely explored and exhausted all other funding options. And then it's saying we can fund up to the 50% level of easement value. And then we do require them to donate a minimum of 25% of their easement.
Got it. Okay,
So
that helps.
they're donating 50% of the easement value. So that also satisfies that condition. Does that help?
Yeah, that was exactly what I was looking for, because I was confused when Joe was talking about 50% donation, but this clears it up.
Sorry.
Okay, perfect.
Thank
And
you,
we're
Erin.
still in the process of, we're working with Jill on getting application guidelines for requests for the bond, and that should be happening very soon. But maybe this could be something that we include in the application so that, the land trust could like check boxes like, provide an explanation of how it fits into these conditions. So.
That helps. Thank you.
I could also just seeing this bullet of time sensitive project, I said this the last time as well. SHC has been trying to negotiate the purchase of a conservation easement on this property for probably 20 years. And under the previous ownership, we could never get agreement of all of the board members to go forward with the conservation easement and agree on a purchase price. The property sold a couple of years ago. And so having the current board in agreement and on the purchase price, I mean, it took us probably 5 months just to get the option agreement signed, which we do have now. So I would consider this a time sensitive project, just that we have the momentum and agreement of that board of directors for this Lake Even Preserve LLC.
Good.
It's also such a loved community property too, like it has a special place in many people's hearts.
Absolutely. I will be at the Leaf Festival this weekend, as will many other people.
Michelle, I've got a question.
Mhm.
Once this is put into your bucket, obviously this is going to allow people onto the property. So who is going to be basically the steward of this property?
So that's a really good point, Nancy. Putting a conservation easement on the property actually does not mean that it has public access. That's standard with all easements, as you probably know. Our farmers would be remiss if they had conservation easements and that meant the public was not now allowed access to their land. So many people are able to go onto this land if you visit Camp Rockmont or take a tour of the Black Mountain College historic structures. You go to the Leaf Festival, there's sort of, you can even rent cabins out there and get access to the trails. But it is not going to be public access as it always has been. And so SHC, it will be because we got money from the North Carolina Land and Water Fund, there will be a state-held conservation easement on the property, and SHC will be responsible for monitoring the easement annually.
Oh, okay.
That's how the state requires it when they approve the funds. It's their easement, and then SHC is going to be the monitor.
All right, good. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, thank you for asking it.
Anything else for Michelle?
Yeah, I have a quick question related to your question, Nancy. So I'm curious why you brought this to our board and not passive rec. And what was your decision process to do that? Is it because the full public it's not open to the public in general? And is that your big decision that you make when you decide where to go with these?
Yeah, well, this is the first one, so we're sort of making our best first effort. But you are correct. The public is not the full access to the property, so it wouldn't, I don't think, qualify for passive rec. And because we've got, this is going to be a conservation easement, so it just seemed like it fit best into that bucket of funding.
That is correct. And that was a question I initially had when I first started reviewing the application materials as well. But when I saw that the property was not going to be open to the full public, that would automatically make it not eligible for passive rec.
And the passive rec funds are for purchases, right? Not conservation easement?
It can be for acquisitions, or it can also be for improvements on land. The easements are very likely going to be part of that picture, depending on the project setup. But also that application window is not going to be open until early 2024. So if, even if this project were going to be open to the public, it would have to wait for that application window to open to be able to pursue those things.
Okay, yeah, thanks for
But
that
I
clarification.
think you're right. It isn't, the main focus of the passive recreation lands bucket is not paying for conservation easements. It's more for land acquisition than improvement.
and backfill.
improvements. At least that's my.
That's correct. I wanted to clarify that, like, in the, contracts for those projects, it might be the case that it makes sense to put an easement on part of the property. So it's not that there's no case easements are going to be part of that process, but correct. The main purpose of that bucket is acquiring land and funding improvements such as trails on land easement.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify, because I think Nancy and Robert, some of your questions were kind of circling around this, that this property is still going to remain in private ownership, and the landowners will manage the land and make decisions as they have about who comes onto the property. That won't be a decision the FHC makes in the future, or Land and Water Fund. And so being an easement, there's as much public access as the landowners deem proper for the
Right.
property.
Okay. Well, it sounds like the gate that is going to make the difference, and I think somebody else said this too, that if it's going to be passive public access, like Spivey Mountain, okay, that's going to go to the passive people, the passive use people. And if it's still going to be like what I look at as a traditional easement, which is what this is, then it's going to come to us. Okay, all right. So I think that's an important thing for people to know, because I think there's a lot of people in the community that think this bond issue is to open up more spaces for people to go hiking and mountain biking, the public. And I think some of that has come from the early press releases about the bonds. So
I think it is. I mean,
yeah.
that's a portion of it, not all of it, but
Yeah.
the question that I would have, and maybe this is getting too far into the weeds, is like, when a project comes forth that may potentially have a conservation easement, but is also going to allow the public use of the land, does it go to passive lands first and then come to us? Is that applicant eligible to be able to apply for both buckets? Okay, great.
No, they have to choose a bucket. And I have made myself available that I can consult applicants about which bucket might be a better fit for them. But they can only receive funding from one.
Okay. Okay.
And then a question back to are they going to be, is there going to be a forest management plan, and are they going to actively manage in some way, or in terms of Lake Eden once the easement is placed?
So
That'd be for
that's a
Michelle.
Question, sorry.
That's okay.
They are not going to be actively harvesting timber on this property.
I'm managing. I wouldn't say harvesting. I'm saying managing the easement area for forest protection, kind of invasives, those types of things. It's one of the questions in our criteria list, so that's why I'm asking.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. I do not believe that they currently have a forest management plan on the property.
Okay.
So I think they do very responsible, stewardship, but as far as active forest management subject to a forest management plan, they don't currently have that. That's not to say they wouldn't, but I can get some more detailed information from them about, like, do they manage for invasives on their own without that? They're very hands-on.
The question in our criteria is consider how the project may contribute to the maintenance of a viable forest resource economy in the county. So I'd partly look at that as like being able to deal with invasives and things. And so I'm just curious. That just helps me answer that question. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I don't have the answer right now, but I'll find out and follow up.
Okay.
Good question, Matt.
Also, I think keeping a forest forested, and if the easement allows for forestry in the future, this may change hands eventually, and the land use could eventually change. So that's if something were developed, then it obviously comes out of the potential forestry use. So that's another way to look at that question, I think.
Did everybody get that? So it's under a forestry present use value exemption. Is that what you're saying, Jess?
I don't know
she's
that
saying,
it could be, and that's another way of looking at that, Matt, but I think just generally that if the land were developed and the forests were gone, the potential for forestry there would be totally removed from the land base. Whereas if it remains forested, whether or not they're actively managing that forest in the short term, if the land changed hands and the land use there changed, there would be the potential for forestry in the county still there on that property.
Matt, do you think that that's something that should be added to the criteria that for bond issue money, that there is a forestry plan in place?
Well, I mean, and maybe Jen and Jess and Michelle could speak to it better, but it would seem to me that long-term, you would want to have the ability to manage in some form or fashion. In our question as the Land Conservation Advisory Board, it offers certain points for the property contains forest land and the landowners are practicing forest stewardship. And then it's less points if there's no forest land based on us because we're assuming it's not going through the ag board at that point.
Right.
So when you look at it in that respect, it would be interesting to know whether there's, to me at least, whether there's a management plan so that if it does change hands, it doesn't necessarily get opened up and become no longer forest, and whether that might be allowed in the easement. And it doesn't necessarily mean we wouldn't approve it, in my opinion. It just means that it might get less points as a forest land if there's not a forest management plan, because it means that it could end up reverting to something else if the land trust and that landowner and any of the other players, let's say, would allow it. And then I don't know how it works with present use value. I was thinking that for some reason, when you place an easement, you might lose your present use value exemption because you wouldn't. Okay. Is that right?
No, a lot of our conservation easements are in present use value.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
That's not important to me necessarily. It's more having a management plan or not and understanding the impacts so that we can make a educated decision.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I mean, I would just say too, just based on, our experience with landowners in the region, they generally only have a forest management plan if they're in present use value for forestry. And that means that they have to harvest timber, which a lot of them don't want to do. They want to try and maintain, older trees and mature forest canopy. From the land trust perspective, I mean, we allow a lot of conservation easements that have commercial timber harvest. But, we often prefer to not have that, just because it's a direct conduit for invasive species to be brought throughout these, otherwise pristine forest canopies through, and, just the disruption of skid trails and, timber landing areas and all of that. So it's a tricky issue, I think, because I do think forest management plans will guide people to, if they are managing their forests, to do it in the most sound way possible. But it also, when it's paired with the commercial timber harvest, there's some negatives there as far as water quality impacts and things like that. Just the process of removing timber.
I think we could, so we have some options. We have a handful of great foresters in the county that do forest management plans that, don't have to focus on harvest. They can focus more on management for wildlife or, invasives or whatever. Just to be clear, you can request funding in the transaction cost request for a forest management plan. So if LCAB feels like that's an important factor for properties that have larger forest components, the land trust can request to pay for a forest management plan. So we can ensure that the property or the landowner has the plan for maintenance. And so that's an option.
Yeah, but these issues we're talking about now are, to me anyway, these are not new issues. These are issues that we've been working on for all of our easements about forestry plan or not forest plan. But when I look at the bond money, I want to look beyond the sale and say, if people think that everything is going to be open, we have to make sure that we don't give that impression when we present this to the public. And part of that, I think, would be knowing that there is or is not a forestry plan in place. And I do agree that with having a forest plan in place, you have law sometimes is not the best solution. So, okay.
And
Anything
just to be
else?
clear, to be
Yeah.
in PUV with a forestry plan, you have to do some type of harvest. To
Yeah,
have a forestry
right.
plan in general,
Right.
you're not
But it
required.
doesn't necessarily have to be I mean, you don't have to clear the whole land. I mean, you can do a lot of invasive
Right.
work over
Exactly.
time, and you can do a
Right.
lot of thinning and forest health stuff. And I'm not an advocate necessarily for, if it's in present use value, from my standpoint, Land Conservation Advisory Board, I would advocate to understand what that forest management plan says. But
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily say that they have to have one if it's not something that's part of their program and it's not in the present use value.
Right. Yep. But like I say, that's not a new issue.
No.
That we've been, I can think of property out here in Reems Creek that, everything has fallen through because the property owner did not agree with the partner about logging. And so, but that's been around for a long time. So. Okay,
And
anything else?
Jess made a good point in the chat too, that if at least 25% of the conservation easement is donated, then the landowner can stay in the present use value for timber, but be exempt from the requirement to harvest timber.
Okay, that's good.
The having a bargain sale conservation easement on a property actually enables people to maintain their forest management plan, but not harvest the timber. And
That's
like
good to
Matt
know.
said, that
Yeah.
you can get a forest management plan, which main purpose is wildlife openings or,
Okay.
invasive
Corridors,
management.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, good. I don't have access to chat right now, but I think that's a really important issue that thank you for bringing that up. Okay, any other questions for Michelle?
One other, this isn't as probably in the weeds. Is any of the Black Mountain, the historic stuff in the easement area from Back Mountain College and all that?
No, all the structures are down by the Lake Eden area. But the state, I guess it's considered the immediate surrounding landscape of the historic site.
Okay. Nothing else for for Michelle. Michelle, thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. There will
This
be a 4-day long site visit starting on Thursday with live music and
Party time.
thank you
Okay.
guys so much. It's really very thrilling to be
This is exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
stage.
Okay. Let's
Awesome.
go back.
I have to pop off because I have a 9 o'clock appointment downtown. So
Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's just go to, okay, Southern App, that's Michelle. Oh, she already dropped. Michelle, is there anything else from Southern App?
I can take that, Nancy, since Michelle's got to go.
Okay, all right.
thank you, Jess.
Hey, Jess.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Great to see you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We have not had any new closings since our last meeting. However, NCDA has approved all of our Young home place. This is Patricia Young, right next to the Buncombe County held Aubrey and Rita Wells home place, and next to Terry Wells, kind of sandwiched in between those two that this board approved transaction costs for. So if we don't close that by the next meeting, it'll be before the year's out. So that's an
Okay.
exciting one coming up. And Full Sun Farm 2 also should be closing before the end of the year. So we've got some farms coming down the pipeline. I'll be excited to tell you when they've actually closed.
Good. Thank you. Anyone here from Conserve Carolina? Okay. I may give Kieran a call offline and just, find out what's going on down there and encourage him to have somebody here. Okay, Riverlink.
Hey,
Anna. Hi, Hannah.
hey. As we have some different projects in the works, but nothing right now that I really have to report on that's super relevant.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Jill. Yes, Jill, we're gonna hold it. Oh, hold it. No, Ariel. We gotta do our stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, good to be back. We have just a few updates. I know Avni has been super busy over the last few months doing our project approval process with the Ag Advisory Board. So we have a handful of new projects that just recently got approved by the commissioners. We received funding for all of our state applications from the ADFP fund. And so that's going to be, I think, 3 new projects. We brought in about $1 million-ish to the county with that fund. So we'll be working on trying to get those, projects started up. We have a few gonna hopefully close this fall, but mostly we're focusing on putting together our grant applications for the state and federal grants. So busy. I know that's pretty much all we have to update on today, but I will let Jill, I know we have some exciting new things happening with the bonds. So I'll definitely let Jill take it from there.
Okay.
So especially, so the first update is that last night, the commissioners did vote to adopt the evaluation criteria for passive recreation lands projects. I shared those criteria with this group previously, but I can also send them out again. But there's both qualifying criteria and weighted criteria for passive recreation lands projects. And as I mentioned earlier, we are hoping to open that application window ideally in January 2024, and then we'll be able to move into project review and selection in the spring. So that was the last set of evaluation criteria that required board adoption. So we're very excited to move forward with that. The board also voted to approve the first official open space bond project last night, which is the Woodson Greenway project. That was one of the 2 shovel-ready greenways that were included as part of the bond referendum. And so we got those funds officially approved by the board, and I able to move forward with that project as well. And then the final update is that the commissioners also voted to approve a budget item for a greenways and trails master plan and an open space master plan. Both of those plans are going to be conducted in tandem with the Parks and Recreation master plan that is currently underway. And those will help inform kind of what our priorities are for funding moving forward in the long term with open space in Logan County, and give a little more direction on how bond funds can also be allocated in the future. And that open space plan will also touch on the agricultural lands. So that's obviously very relevant to this group and this conservation business. So it's very exciting, and we're looking forward to seeing kind of what works out of those things.
Good. Okay, any questions for Jill?
I did have one last comment, which Ariel also hinted at earlier, which is that I am working on those application guidelines for bond specific easement projects.
Okay.
And hope to get those completed as soon as possible.
Good.
Especially now that all of these big agenda items for the commission is laid.
Yep, exciting times.
Yeah.
Very exciting. Okay, any more questions? Any more comments from the board?
I have one comment, Nancy.
Hey, Robert.
It's exciting, Jill, to hear that the county, we're actually spending money now from this bond.
Yay.
That's one, and it's kind of exciting that our group here is looking at the Lake Eden project. That's 1/40th of the bond monies that we have. So we're about to, looks like, tap into our bonds. I do want to make one important comment, and that's to you, Ariel. It's so great to see you again. You look healthy. You look like you're sleeping. How you feeling? You good?
I'm feeling good, not sleeping much, but that's to be expected.
Well, you look terrific. It's great to see you.
Thanks. Good to be back.
Good. And in Ariel's absence, I've been working a lot with Avni on one project up in Barnardsville, and boy, she stepped into Ariel's boots and has done a great job and has communicated well with our property owners. And Avni, you've done a great job.
Thank you.
Here, I'll second that.
Yeah. We're so happy to.
What?
Oh, I was just saying, we're so grateful to have Avni on our team.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anything else from the board? Okay, well, then can I have a motion, please, to adjourn the meeting?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thanks, Matt. Second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good. All right. Well, it was good to see you all today, and these are exciting times. This feels really good. And so I hope to see you all next month, and I hope lots of things happen in the ensuing time that we